Hello and welcome to PMI's Leading for Business Excellence podcast. I'm Susanna Clark, Managing Partner of PMI, the performance improvement, consulting, training and apprenticeship firm. This podcast brings inspiring stories from across the globe and from a multitude of sectors with great leaders who share their experience and what business excellence means to them. It's my absolute pleasure to talk to Laura McLaren in this episode, Global Head of Process Experience at Tesco. Having honed her skills through RBS and VT, Laura talks passionately about continuous improvement and getting the best out of people. Laura loves change and is really clear that CI has to be human-centric. It needs to encourage routines and be fun. In a huge organisation such as Tesco, with over 300,000 people, Laura talks about bringing out the best with a diverse workforce and encouraging people to think about controlling the controllables. Laura, welcome to Leading for Business Excellence. It's great to have you with me today. Thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you for having me along. It's really exciting to be able to sit and chat a little bit about, what we do and share some of those kind of learnings and successes. So really appreciate it.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to this conversation. So I wonder if we can just start off with you introducing yourself to our audience. Just tell us a bit about your role and what you do.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Laura McLaren. I've got about 15 years experience in change and transformation across different industries, different archetypes. So I started my career with Royal Bank of Scotland, have worked within financial services and asset management, but also had a stint with British Telecom. So yeah, quite varied. Really like moving between industries because it keeps it interesting. In the type of role that I do, I love change. And now I am in Tesco. So currently, I head up our process experience function within Tesco Business Solutions. Tesco Business Solutions is Tesco's GBS. So we support and enable the wider Tesco group to be able to do what they need to do to serve our customers, communities and planet brilliantly every day. I have a wonderful team of people who are spread globally across our hubs. And what we really look at is how do we use capabilities like Lean, Six Sigma and change management to improve our processes, to improve experience for customers or colleagues, and to generally just make us as efficient and effective as possible.
And so, it's a large organisation, isn't it? I mean, how do you get that reach into all of those different parts of Tesco in order to ensure that everybody is, on the same playing field? I know that sounds a bit of a cliche, but you know what I mean, that they're all working in the same way and have got the same sense of how they approach change and process improvement.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, you can't. It's an organisation of 300,000 colleagues globally. It's huge, and if you think about an organisation like Tesco, there's lots of different parts to it. So there's stores, there's supply chain and distribution, there's our head office functions like people and finance and property. We then have a GBS. It's not a one size fits all. So within each of the different parts of Tesco, you'll see different change and transformation teams, and they'll have different priorities, and that's really important because that's how, as an organisation that big, we get it right and manage change well. In the world that I'm in our GBS, we have about 5,000 colleagues globally across UK, Republic of Ireland, Central Europe, and India. And what we do is we very much pull on the bench strength of our colleagues within our functions to make sure that we are looking at kind of small change, marginal gains, and making things better every day. But then what we also do is have specialists who look after bigger projects and programs, and wrap governance around them and manage them through. And then it's about how you then kind of meet that in the middle. So it's not an easy job. And then you also have to make sure that all those other parts of the organization that I spoke about, you're connecting with them, collaborating with them, ensuring that ultimately whatever decision you make or change you make is resulting in a positive outcome for whoever that affects, be it customer, be it colleague, be it supplier. So I wish I could sit here and say everything is perfect, but I think all of us who are in change and transformation roles know it's a constant moving feast, and it's a constant evolution, especially given, how fast technology can advance as well. And you're kind of working around that.
I really, and I completely appreciate that explanation that you gave around that need for effectively there being, obviously there are a number of ways of doing things, but two predominant ways. So one is that small incremental, gain that you have and work with every day. And the other are those big projects, and bringing those two together. So can we talk a little bit about that, the first of those two, of what you've done to create the motivation, plus obviously the skills to be thinking about that, ongoing marginal gains every day, because that's really interesting in terms of, what we talk about in continuous improvement, for instance.
Yeah. And I think if I talk about that, I think there'll be a lot of people who will recognize similar programs or capabilities within their own organizations, right? So continuous improvement is nothing new. When I started in RBS many, many, many years ago, we had a lean program. And what that has evolved into in many organizations now is what we call continuous improvement. But essentially,
Yes.
it's the same principle. So you can do loads of top-down discontinuous change in organizations, and that's fine, and that will bring you big business benefit. But ultimately, that doesn't really help you turn the dial on colleague engagement. It doesn't really help you understand the experience that your customers, be that internal or external, are truly having. And it also doesn't help you then improve performance of your teams, your frontline teams who are providing that experience. And so, in looking at continuous improvement and marginal gains, it's so important. When you start to talk to people, so like frontline managers and their teams, about what really frustrates you, like what is getting in the way, what is stopping you from providing the level of service that you want to provide, they do talk about technology. They will say, we've got 15 systems and why can't we just have one?
Yes.
Or, you're always going to get those responses. But when you start to frame it differently and you say to them, let's talk about controlling the controllables. So if I said to you, what would you change in how you work every day? What kind of different routines would you bring in to make things better? Actually, what then you start to find is people talk about gaining greater visibility or transparency on how we are measuring performance. So having really good conversations as a team about what does our customer sat look like, and what does our on-time payment metric look like, what does, where do we sit in terms of where we want to be and the type of service we want to provide versus where we sit today. And then you start helping them slowly move towards that and problem solve that using the expertise and the knowledge that only they have, because they do this every day.
Yes.
And It's so important, because over time, what you start to see is a bunch of really empowered colleagues. We're not talking about making people into like Lean Six Sigma master black belts here.
No.
We're talking about like having really good conversations with people, appreciating and respecting the knowledge and experience that they bring to the table, and using that to then start to dig deep into processes and make very small but very tangible improvements. And over time, when you see that build and build and build and build, you know, that kind of marginal gains piece, it is really, really, really powerful. And you know, it gets people excited and interested in change. It changes people's reaction and perspective around change. Rather than it being done to you, you're doing it for yourself.
Yes.
But ultimately, you get into that kind of nitty gritty, like, you know, we can put a new IVR in place. If you've got like a contact center environment, you can put a new IVR in place and say, okay, we've gone to natural language IVR. That's great for our customers. We've saved ourselves a bit of money. You know, we're now industry standard. But ultimately, if that customer goes through that IVR and they talk to Laura and she isn't able to answer their questions or take their payment or help them find their missing item, so what? Continuous improvement is very human centric. And that's kind of the power of, you know, your biggest and best asset is the people that you have in your organization. And this type of change really leverages them. And one of the things we've seen within Tesco is and within, you know, TBS is very much the power of having good conversations with people and using their knowledge and expertise to make things better.
Yes. And I mean, you're absolutely right. I remember quite early on in my time with PMI, our MD at the time, a lady called Jane Seddon, and I remember her talking about giving people a good listening to. And that was a really, that phrase has stuck with me. I've been here 14 years now, and I'm still saying it today because it really resonated. And it's just that complete switch, as you say, from doing it to doing it with. And the motivation you see from people when they have been listened to, been asked what they think and they've responded and they've been listened to, and you've started, as you say, to make a change and to help them through that, then they believe it's worth talking then, don't they? Because people otherwise feel, I can tell my boss what's wrong, but nothing ever happens, nothing ever changes. And that's the frustration of so many folk, is that they don't feel listened to. And even if they are listened to, then things do not get better. So it doesn't matter if it's a small change, but at least doing something, starting, as you say, and gradually improving makes this huge difference to how people feel about their work and how then inclined they are to use their ongoing thoughts and recommendations for the future. Yeah.
I mean, I am a great believer in routines. So I guess people will probably be familiar with Mike Rother and Toyota Kata.
Yes.
That really opened I remember reading that book and having like a moment of, oh my God,
yes.
I spent my whole career talking to people about doing stuff. I should have been talking to them about routines. It was like a real eye opener for me about, I've been going through the paces of how I know how to teach people lean. And actually I've been overcomplicating it. And I've been giving people tasks and I've been like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. The moment you start to talk about routines, or you frame it as a routine, it's so much easier.
Yes.
So like you've said, people, step one, listen to people. But if you don't have, so step 2 then is create a mechanism where when you listen to people, it goes somewhere, you can prioritize it, and then you do something with it. And that all sounds great, and we all are used to doing those things. But if you don't build it into a routine that makes sense, in an operational environment, all that falls away very quickly, because there's always something more important. There's always a new priority or a new shiny piece of training or a new system. Or so building a routine of, we talk about our performance. If it's not where it needs to be, we highlight that. We then take that into a problem solving session, whatever that may look like, where we stack it up against our other problems, we prioritize it, we do something with it, and then we record that somewhere. And having that routine that you maybe do once a week, once a month, that's where you start to see it embed.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because similarly, I was talking to a client a couple of weeks ago now about a program of work, and I was talking. One of the things they said to me was they use the Demaic cycle. They're familiar with the Demaic cycle, and they said we're really good at Demai. We're not so good at the C. And actually, the C. I've always felt that the word control didn't really sum up for me the spirit of what you're looking for. But the C really is the routines, isn't it? It's the routines that happen after you've made the change. And I think that actually what they're experiencing is what many people experience. They do work, they do make an improvement, and somehow they don't put in place, whether you call it daily habits or weekly habits or, routines, whatever the word is that works for your description of what you need. But if that isn't there, how on earth are people ever going to maintain the gains that they've achieved?
Yeah. And I'm also a great believer in change management. Now, that sounds silly because I'm sure a lot of people will be sitting listening going, you should be doing that anyway, Laura. But it is amazing how many organizations either don't do change management or don't do it well because they make the mistake of thinking change management and project management are the same thing. Maybe it's because, way back when my background is psychology and neuroscience, and I love behavioral stuff. I love understanding why people do what they do.
Yes.
But in this role in change, it's the same thing. So if you go and implement a change, you could have the best project manager in the entire world. But landing that actually isn't just about the milestones, the Gantt chart, the investment, whatever. Actually landing it is about the readiness of the population of people who are going to receive it and whether they're going to welcome it or not, and then whether they're going to continue to use it. And just talking about like the C in Demaic, that is so important. Like, and I always hammer it home with my team. Like, we could do the best change in the world, but if people aren't bought into that and they don't see the value in it and they don't feel like they're part of the change, we may as well not do it because it's never going to work. People will always find a way to revert back to the old way.
Because change is tricky, isn't it? I mean,
it's hard.
It's hard, and we get really used to working the way we've always worked. And we feel comfortable with that, even if what we're doing is somewhat frustrating sometimes. There is comfort in what we know. Helping people to change and to be motivated to change is really hard. And there are people, you said at the beginning, I love change, but not everyone feels that way. And they don't even know that they don't feel that way. It's not, I don't think it's conscious.
Yeah. I love, I love those examples that you use in training of change where people now don't even realize it. So I always use the Oyster card example of, you used to have to queue up and buy a ticket, put your ticket through the machine. And when you think about that now, if you ever have to go buy a ticket in the tube in London,
Yes.
you're like, oh my God, the thought
Yes.
of buying a ticket is horrendous. But when Oyster came in, people were like, oh, you've got to buy this card and load this card. And people were then frustrated that buying a ticket was more expensive than using and loading the card. And now we're at a point where you could just tap your debit card, tap your phone, get on with your day. Now, that was a huge change. Tons of brilliant examples of positive and negative reinforcement in there and how they moved that change through. The way that you know that it was successful is that now you do not want to go back to the old way.
Yes. Yes.
That's the biggest, best example of knowing that you've got it right. You do not ever want to go back to standing in that line and buying that ticket.
Yes. Very good. I love that example. That's great. Going back to what you were saying at the start about your role, that you have a large population of people, but you also have a large population of people in diverse locations. So I'm interested about how that works for you in terms of the different cultures coming together. And, what do you think are the key things to making that a successful team working together despite the distance apart that you all are?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I would say is pre-COVID, it was a lot harder. One of the few good things that COVID gave us was people's acceptance and ability to work virtually and to be open to leveraging more virtual tools like Miro or Teams or, so that has made, I've been part of and I've ran global teams for many, many, many years. It feels easier now because of the technology that we've got, but also people were forced to embrace that. I won't go
Yes.
back to the last chat about change management, but people were forced to embrace that, and it's really helped.
I was reflecting the other day about the very idea that we used to have Teams calls where we had video capability and we all had cameras, but nobody turned them on.
Yeah.
Nobody. And now the first thing you say is, can you turn your camera on if somebody hasn't got stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when it used to just be spider phones in the office and conference calls, and you can't even imagine going back to just talking to somebody and not being able to see them.
No.
But yeah, so I think number one, the technology has made it easier. I think the second thing is I love having a global team because I actually think diversity is a real strength. Now, I believe that where you are running change in country, ideally you have an in-country lead. And if possible, having that person on site in country is the best case scenario because they can build relationships and little things like the conversations that you have when you're getting a coffee. You bump into people and you say hi and you learn a little bit about their kids or their pets or their parents or, I think those things are invaluable as well because that builds trust and it builds connection.
Yeah.
But also those in-country leads, they know the culture and the routines and they really truly understand the people that they're working with and what they're going to respond well to and what they're not going to respond well to. So they've built that experience, even if they're not from that country or city, and they've traveled there. They're physically experiencing it. It's the world around them. In my team at the moment, I'm very, very lucky. I've got kind of in-country leads for each of the hubs we look after. When I bring that team together, though, like you've described, I've got a bunch of different people, loads of diversity, gender, age, ethnicity, religion, you name it. We actually are a very, very diverse team. I actually think that is our strength. Because in my experience, people who have nothing in common, or you don't think they will, tend to get on better in building working relationships faster because you're genuinely interested about that person. You're genuinely interested in learning a little bit more about their world and themselves. And then I'm a great believer in you've got to have fun at work. Like
Yeah.
if you're coming into work and you're not having fun or smiling or laughing or feeling good about it, you're not in the right place. And when I bring people into my team, it's always about, are you going to be a good fit for the team? And are you going to bring that kind of positivity and energy and humor, as well as, are you absolutely brilliant at what you do? And we're all very different. You know, we've all got different personalities, but when we go on to calls, it's genuinely, the first 5-10 minutes is always about, you know, the weather in India is super hot right now. How are you all getting on? Is everything okay? We were having a bit of a laugh about the Six Nations today because we've got a couple of Scots and a Welshman,
Yeah.
and we like to wind each other up a bit about the rugby. But then our colleague in Central Europe, rugby's not very big there, and she's like, I don't get why you guys are so passionate about this. So you know, you're able to have those kind of light, humorous, human conversations, which almost sets the tone of, remember, at the end of the day, we're all just people and we're not perfect. So when you then have to have those kind of tough conversations about, we're not on track, we're red, we're behind on our efficiency targets, we've got a ton of attrition, people come at those with more empathy.
Okay.
Because they're remembering that they're talking to their colleague rather than I'm just powering through and battling through. So
Yes.
I think there's huge strength in having a high level of diversity within your team. And that isn't just globally. You know, even if I look within our hubs, within the in-country teams, I'm really keen that we have a high level of diversity. Actually, within our team in Bangalore, we're one of the few teams that have more women than men, and we're quite a technical team. We're a change team. I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud that we've got, a bit of gender diversity in there, and that it feels like a safe space to come and work and be part of. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And then all of this is underpinned by effectively the method, the consistent method to change and improve performance,
Yes.
which I think is, you know, the fantastic part of what we do. Is it doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter what process you're working in. The common ground is that actually having a method to approach this can work for all.
Having a method and having excellent coaches. The coaches are the secret sauce. Because you can have...
See, I love that secret sauce. I will share that with our coaches.
I mean, you can have the best training in the world. You can have the best method written down on a page. You can have brilliant coaching materials. You can spend a fortune on collateral to engage people, like mugs and hats and whatever it is. But you need people who can bring it to life. And you know, I come back to what I said earlier, bring it to life and make it fun. A few people will probably have seen this. There's a YouTube video about a subway station, and they did an experiment where they filmed, you know, average number of days, people taking the stairs versus using an escalator. And every day, about 95% of people went up that escalator. Nobody took the stairs. And overnight, they put one of those giant pianos, like from the film Big.
Mm-hmm.
Showing my age here now, so hopefully, if you've not seen Big, go watch it.
Yeah.
They put one of those giant pianos up the stairs, and what is really interesting is it flips on its head, right? 95% of people took the stairs. Nobody was on the escalator because suddenly it's fun. And you wanted to do it because it was a novelty and it was fun and it was
Yes.
interesting. So a lot of what I've done over the years myself and with folks that I've been lucky enough to work with in my team, we use a lot of gamification. Like we
Okay.
make it fun. I can teach you about lean by telling you all about Henry Ford, and I can tell you all about Toyota, and and it's great and it is really interesting. But it's a history lesson. It's not helping bring to life what that means for you and your job and why this is going to be a different way of working. But see if I play Lego with you for an hour. You're going to walk out that room smiling, laughing, feeling a little lighter, feeling like you've had maybe even like a little circuit breaker from a very hard day at work. But if I sit in a room and talk to you for an hour about the history of lean and the 5 lean principles, I don't think you're going to walk out that room feeling quite as light.
Well, no, and not connected either. You don't see the relevance, do you?
Yeah.
I completely agree. And when you see people, be it a Lego exercise, I know I was talking with Cooper Vision and they did a whole paper plane exercise.
Yeah.
The joy at suddenly being able to, build your tower or whatever it may be, whether, it used to be 5 minutes and now we can do it in 30 seconds because we have smoothed out the process and we balance the work and we know all the component parts. We've got some great instructions and people are leaping around and who knew that writing a set of instructions would ever be that much fun,
Adults really figure out. One of the nicest things I've heard is people who go home to their kids and their kids say, "What did you do at work today?" And they say, "Oh, I played Lego today."
Yes.
And that's the truth. They did.
Yes.
And their kids are like, "Oh my God." Kids who previously thought that their parents' jobs were really boring and dry and they just worked in an office suddenly are interested in what mum and dad do. And that's really nice as well. Like having the ability to run a change program where people go home and tell their kids about it.
I've had people go home and do it with their kids, and then send us a video showing us how they got their son or daughter to. And they're just wonderful, absolutely. Yeah. Because then that you've got them, haven't you? Because they're paying it forward. Yeah. Naturally. Yeah.
Yeah. Problem you get though is you eventually run out of games. And I have spent many a weekend bribing my friends with bottles of wine to come to my house. Be like, right, I need you to fold these pieces of paper in a certain way to create a new game for work. Very sad, but yeah,
fun, still fun.
It comes down to for me, it comes down to 3 things, right? It's got to be people. It's got to be human centric. You've got to listen to people and respect what they bring to the table. You've got to have routines. Routines are life. We all have routines. Like in our lives, we have routines and that's how we operate. And then it's got to be fun. And if you can get those 3 things, you're on to a winner.
Excellent. For you, what when you look back at things that were pivotal moments for you, what would you say really sticks out at something that felt like a success, but also changed? You mentioned, Matt Rother and so on, but is there anything else that has really stuck out for you in your thinking?
Yeah. So I was with Royal Bank of Scotland for a number of years, and then I decided to move to British Telecom. Now, big jump. RBS had been my first experience out of university, like a real proper job. Their lean program was very well known, very well respected. Had been done in conjunction with McKinsey. A lot of rigor, and driven a huge amount of value for the bank. at a time when they really needed it. There was a burning platform. But I decided to take the leap into something slightly different and go into BT. And it was the best move I've ever made in my career. And the reason for that is BT's very interesting, telecoms is very interesting, and don't get me wrong, but the team that I went into just honestly, I think set me up for my entire career. I learned more in 6 years in that team than I've learned prior to that or since.
Wow.
I guess there's a couple of things within that are the reason for me choosing that period of my career is really standing out and being pivotal. So the first is my manager. I worked for a guy called Anu Kalia, and he was just, one of the best managers I've ever had, because he truly was a manager and a leader.
Mm-hmm.
There is a big differentiation between a manager and a leader in my mind. So, if you were off sick or you put holidays in or the process stuff of managing people, he was on it.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing was ever too difficult. Nothing was ever a chore. He absolutely made sure that you being in work was as easy as possible, because he recognized that if the hygiene factors were there and that was easy, then you would be at your best. But then from a leadership perspective, he was absolutely brilliant as a coach. And he would always have a huge amount of trust in us. And it was, a scenario where sometimes you'd be a bit nervous, sometimes you'd be going into something very new, talking to somebody very senior. BT is an enormous organisation, so sometimes you were working with field engineers, sometimes you were in a contact centre, sometimes you were with a professional services team. You could be doing a bit of cost transformation work versus a bit of kind of lean coaching or training. So the job was really broad, and you kind of had to be on your toes all the time and ready for anything.
Mm-hmm.
But he had so much trust. He'd sit you down, tell you what you needed, give you a bit of coaching, never give you the answer, and say, off you go. Go make it your own. Go figure it out for yourself. If you failed, he instantly would always be like, well, what did you learn?
Mm-hmm.
And it was about, I don't care that you failed, but what I care about is you learn from it. That's all I ask. And it was the most phenomenal 6 years. The team under him, absolutely brilliant bunch of people. We actually are all still in touch with each other. We've been to weddings, people have had babies, it feels very much like a community of people who worked together years ago who still kind of keep in touch. And that speaks volumes for the environment and culture that he built in our time working with him.
And I'm guessing he had an enormous influence and has had an enormous influence on you as a leader.
Oh, yeah, 100%. That's the kind of leader that I want to be. I have I've never told him this, so if he's going to listen to this and find this out now. Sometimes I have moments where I go, what would Anu do? Because we're very different people. And I'm a great believer in authenticity, like leading with authenticity, right? So you shouldn't try and be something you're not. You shouldn't try and be someone you're not. And I am me and he is him.
Yeah.
And we will always be different. But sometimes taking a step back and reflecting and thinking, what would somebody who's quite different from me do in this situation? It can help with your own decision-making and thought process.
Yes.
I don't think that's any bad thing, but he's a leader that I really respect and trust, because I have seen, I guess I've seen over many years the outcome of what he has achieved having worked for him. So that's what, BT was a big pivotal moment because of the person I was lucky enough to work with and the people I was lucky enough to work with. But BT was also really pivotal for me because it's where I started to really see the power of what I described at the start of this conversation: top-down change, big discontinuous, like cost transformation type change, married up with bottom-up marginal gains in a
Okay.
really slick, well-managed way. And that really opened my eyes to, I shouldn't be so siloed or so insular in, I do continuous improvement and that's my thing. I should be seeking out and learning from other change practitioners within this organization who drive different types of change, be that technical program managers in technology or cost transformation directors. I should be actively trying to understand how the change landscape operates in this organization and where I fit within that. Because if I can understand that, I can leverage it. And if I can leverage it, then I can actually hopefully make how the change lands and the functions and the teams and the departments a little bit better by having good conversations and making good decisions. So those two things for me in my career, in that company, I think really kind of shaped who I am as a leader now and how I operate.
Yeah. And if you were out to dinner or in the pub, on a walk, and you met somebody and they were talking about trying to understand that opportunity to be a leader of change and continuous improvement, what would be your advice to them about how they can get going with this, and what are the key things they need to be thinking about if they're just at the beginning?
So I think get a mentor, or even just start to talk to people who do this as their day job and have a good amount of experience in it. And you can do that through LinkedIn. You can do that through within your own organization. Just who's in your transformation team. Even you'd be surprised in your friendship group. You may think, oh, do you know what? I'm not going to ask Suze that because she's an HR director, or I'm not going to ask Ben that because he works in a Tesco store. You'd be surprised about changes everywhere in lots of people's roles, whether you're in operations, whether you're in supply chain, whether you're in professional services. So start having conversations with people and try and get a mentor, someone who's got a good amount of experience of rolling out kind of change and transformation programs. And I don't think in the start it matters what that looks like. It's because you need to figure out where your interest lies anyway. You might be more technology minded. You might be more Lean Six Sigma minded. You'll get there. But then I also think start doing it yourself. So even if you don't have a team and you do a very kind of niche specific role, you absolutely can start doing change. So you can change your own routine. You can think a bit about, well, in what I do, what data do I have? What data do I consume? What data is there? And have I ever really looked at it and looked at the trends of what I'm seeing and how that works within my own space? And how do I know if I'm successful? Am I being ambitious enough about what I want to do? Start practicing it yourself. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to do like a greenbelt project on your first try. But like if you're able to make small changes and then you're able to get some coaching about, well, how do you measure it so that you can show the so what at the end.
Yes.
I think that's the best place to start.
I remember somebody saying to me, what do you think the most important part of PDSA, is at the heart of our teaching, consulting, our own
Yep.
practice in our business. And they said, what do you think is the most important part of PDSA? So if anyone who doesn't know PDSA, that's Plan, Do, Study, Act. And there were sort of different people with different views. And he said, do. Because if you never do anything, you'll never learn. And that's kind of the spirit of what I'm hearing from you is get going, have a go.
Yeah, it's like that marshmallow challenge. Marshmallows and spaghettis. A lot of people do this in kind of training. Build a tower, put the marshmallow on the top. The best way to do it is the way kids do it. So you don't sit there and like debate it for days and create a plan. You do it and you do it and you do it and you do it and you practice and you practice and you practice and you practice. And then you get it. Karate Kid, also great example. You practice, routine. You do it again and again and again.
Yes.
And things like the way that kids learn, martial arts, like lots of things that have nothing to do with business, nothing to do with change or transformation. The same principles apply. We're human. Human behaviour is human behaviour, whether it's at home, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in a work environment. Like how humans learn, it's all the same. And so sometimes we get so focused on, well, this is a work thing and I need to do it this way. No, take a step back. You're a person trying to achieve something. Would you go about it that way if it wasn't a work thing? Maybe not. So, yeah.
Yes, don't be restricted by the environment, as you say. Yeah.
Yeah. It's because it's all about learning and being open to learn and being open to try new things.
Laura, that's fantastic. It's been a joy talking to you. I can see, I can feel the energy you have for this. It shines through, and the fun that you encourage and have yourself in the work. So thank you so much for your time today. Really great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Laura. I really hope you enjoyed this episode of Leading for Business Excellence. If this has inspired you to think about the challenges your leadership team face and how they respond, do get in touch via team@pmi.co.uk or have a look at our leadership development programme in the training section of our website. I'd love to hear from you.